So we're here up on Lookout Mountain near Chattanooga, Tennessee, and this is another one of those sites that you have to be up here to truly appreciate it. Just like Vicksburg, once you're up here, these heights are absolutely stunning and terrifying to think if you have artillery brought all the way up here. It commands this entire valley, and it's not only an important site here, but Chattanooga is an important railroad junction for this entire area of the country. And it changes hands several times during the war.
Because of that, yeah.
And everyone knows that this is a key area. Now, we've covered the Grant's campaigns in the West. We've gone from Fort Donelson to Shiloh to Corinth to Vicksburg, but things are not looking well in Chattanooga.
Well, the whole reason I come to this is because the Army commander locally here, George Thomas, his army had been routed at Chickamauga, 5 or 10 miles south of here in Georgia, and he comes back into this area to refit, but then Bragg's army pursues and lays siege and cuts off all his supplies, so his army's going to start starving out. Because you might be asking, we had an army here, how did they wind up being besieged? There was a fight south of here in Georgia, and Thomas's army had taken all of their guns where they had secured that with them to go fight. They're routed because of another commander who was in charge. Rosecrans was in charge, and that's another day's talk. But in coming back in here in defeat, he doesn't think to get everything back up on the mountain. And as an artillery commander, that's an odd failure that he would miss that. But he allows himself then to be hemmed in by the Confederates ringing this. And the first thing we do when I come in is start bringing supplies. And of course, Thomas thinks that he's being resupplied, which he is. But then he says something to the fact of, why are there more supplies than we need? Well, I'm bringing other forces in, because if I'm going to fight this, I want those munitions and supplies here before the army arrives, so we don't get the same situation where we can't get them supplied. And it leads to this other scrape, and it's at the start of November that happens, so the weather's going to turn, and it snows here, it gets cold. And if they're not fed and they're not properly clothed for the winter, that's going to be really harsh on them even more. I had been preoccupied after Vicksburg with investing Mobile, but because of a horse accident, when I was trying to get to talking with General Banks in Louisiana to work on a coordinated attack, I'm out of consideration to invest Mobile. That Flag Officer Farragut takes the Navy in, and he takes Mobile Bay without any Army support. So now that that's a chess piece removed, then the next thing becomes what area will be for me as the entire Supreme Commander of the Western Theater to look at. And there's trouble here that I have to come as the Supreme Commander and get a look at it. And the significance here of why this is important, obviously it commands everything, but to gain control of this where the river meets several railroads that come together as a commerce point, this is the last significant battle action for me as a commander in the Western Theater. It really solidifies Lincoln's decision to make me General-in-Chief coming in the next year. This occurs here in November of 1863. Towards wintertime. With the supply line cut and a siege all about, I'm able to get through that. And the thing about getting through that is it impresses Lincoln, where he says, well, we can't get supplies in, but somehow Grant managed to get in. And within days after taking in all the information from local commanders, my army's mustered here fine. And it buys me time too, because Sherman's coming in and we get support from the east. Joe Hooker's brought a corps. And he redeems himself here as a corps. It firmly establishes the level for him he tops off at is Corps Command. And the whole fight is an effort to finally secure this once and all for federal control. And that's where we come to at the end of November, which really pushes Lincoln to finally agree with Congress after Vicksburg that they want to make me Lieutenant General commanding all the forces. So it's important for me in my military career, but it's most important that it solidifies Union control of Tennessee.
Absolutely. So figuring out the situation in Chattanooga is all a matter of logistics.
Absolutely.
Kind of go into the concept of the cracker line and opening that up.
I call that the supply line. I refer to it as the cracker line because of the hard bread that comes through. And it's just easier for me to simplify that down in my head for it. But the mathematics of the logistics of Thomas's army and my army now with Hooker's men coming, his corps, we're not just going to have to feed, but we've got to get those winter uniforms. And we have, for every man, How many animals are going to support that? Everything that goes along with the animals. If we're going to control the rail yards and we're going to use those for our benefit, then we've got to come up with bringing in the cars, getting out the cars and the locomotives and all of that infrastructure. And then we're dealing with the citizens of Chattanooga. And it's been our experience going through most of the Western theater that the citizens aren't exactly cooperating with us in a lot of ways. So they have to be pacified to some degree so they're not a threat. And then the military situation has to be subdued so we have that control.
It's interesting to think you have a logistical background. So you have that experience
Quite by accident, but
in Mexico, and you're thinking like a logistician, whereas some of the other commanders, Thomas, the artilleryman, the cavalryman.
Yeah, these other Army commanders, they have their speciality in their branch. And I was being groomed as an infantry officer until in Mexico because of my high math grades and our poor quartermaster that I was made quartermaster. So in subtle ways, the Army was grooming me whether I knew it or not. Even when I leave the Army, I work as bookkeeper for my brothers. So I'm still dealing with numbers and supplies. And that's everything that allows us to invest Donaldson, is having that worked out, what's going to allow the Army to do its job. And what I start to do then is developing division and corps commanders to act somewhat independent, where I can delegate and trust that they're going to do their jobs. The fight here, I have trusted commanders, and the intent is clear, but the terrain works against us then for coordination too, and I think that's something else we can cover along the way.
So we're here on Orchard Knob, and this is another one of those geographic sites that are just absolutely intense to experience in person. The undulation of the ground here is just very extreme. We're here on a piece of ground that commands the whole area, and yet we're in sight of Lookout Mountain, which is just absolutely daunting in the distance there. And skirting this entire area is Missionary Ridge.
The height of Lookout Mountain dominates the entire valley here. And Missionary Ridge to this side is half the height of that. Raccoon Mountain to the west are somewhat in between. So the Confederates, they created this ring that entrapped the army of George Thomas, the Army of the Cumberland. Now we are on the eastern portion of the field that I get to. This is Orchard Knob. There was a fight around the 23rd of November by the forces here to take control of this, because their rebels were up on this, commanding into the town an imposing position of artillery. But they're run off, they're routed, and this becomes my forward observation area for the rest of the fight that's along these ridges to the east. And that is the final stand, if you will, of Bragg's army, where that's the only place he's got left. Hooker's forces have gone up and secured Lookout Mountain, and now the push is over here to this.
This is a pivotal part of pushing out the rebels and taking this portion of the country. Why should Missionary Ridge be in the vocabulary of people that are interested in the Civil War just as much as something like Cemetery Ridge?
The action on this side of the field, the fight at Chattanooga, this is the decisive point that seals the victory that leads to complete control. Well, after developing the fight that we have this in our possession on the 24th, Sherman's forces have come in to the north, they're on our left. Hooker, acting through Thomas's forces, is on our right. I'm here with Thomas to supervise. And the push then is on Missionary Ridge, which runs north to south, facing to the east, and that creates the defensive bowl that Thomas was trapped in. So that's the last bastion that has to be broken through, because we've retaken Lookout Mountain. There's insignificant force on Raccoon Mountain, and we're facing this final push here. The position on top of the ridges is guarded by rifle pits at lower elevations. And I want this done incrementally because of the steep terrain and the difficulty of maneuvering the way we have to. That my order is to take the rifle pits at the lower level, and we'll hold those first before we advance to anything above that. Thomas's men are still smarting from the loss of Chickamauga. They're feeling they need some sort of redemption, and they take it upon themselves. The order is to take these rifle pits, which they do in overwhelming force, and totally break the spirit of the rebel defenders, who then begin simply running, fleeing up the mountain where they think they're safe under their own gun. And the gunners can't do anything because, as you know, the muzzles won't depress, and they're certainly not going to roll things through their own men, but they start doing that very thing. They start firing into a mass of blue and gray that are duking it out medieval style. And Thomas's men are fed up that they just go on their own, and we're here together. And I asked Thomas, "Did you order that?" Because I didn't. And he's reticent to say anything. He's kind of feeling like he's a schoolboy with my finger on his ear, holding him. Because now why is Grant in my back pocket telling me what to do here? But I want to make sure we're doing the right thing. He won't take responsibility. And my fear is that if this goes bad, it's going to look bad on all of us at that point. But the boys carry it, and there's cloud cover across the top where they go above it, just as they do with Lookout Mountain, that we hear the scrape, we hear the row, and we just have to wait for the outcome. And what we see as literally as things clear at the right moment, like it's in a poem, our flag is run up by the 24th Wisconsin, Arthur MacArthur commanding that regiment, but Phil Sheridan is division commander, and he's among them going up, and they're yelling on Wisconsin for their regiment, and up they go, that they push Bragg, and Bragg just breaks, orders everybody. It's a pell-mell kind of a reverse of the Philippine races, where they just break, and that is ending any kind of organized, any potentially strong resistance for Bragg's army, and he falls in complete utter defeat as far as his own reputation, that the Confederate government no longer has any confidence in.
So backing us out, and taking a look at the big picture again, where does the war move once Chattanooga is secured?
I have no designs on further command. I'm content to have this Western command. So my objective then, what's the next significant industry point? South of here in Atlanta. There's rail junctions, there's ironworks. So that to me would be the next point to rip through, because we've already ripped through the center of the Confederacy. Now we're going to start dissecting and sectioning it off.
But given these successes, Washington has some other plans for you.
And it's curious, too, that Halleck, as acting general-in-chief for the War Department, once this is over and we settle back into the winter lull, he asked for my opinion on what should be done in the East. My suggestion is a landing on the Carolina coast and move in, let's say, to Raleigh, and then push north into Virginia. And I said, but if I'm in command out there, that's what I would do. And I don't wish that, because I kind of get a sense that maybe that's what they're looking at. And nobody takes that as any sort of, let's do what Grant thought we should do, because nobody's considering me for that, except now the president. Because the Congress pushed for me to command after Vicksburg. Lincoln's convinced after this fight that I should be the general-in-chief to see to that final push there. Because as we say, any kind of hard, serious resistance in the Tennessee Valley and in the Western Theater is now it's no longer a question. We're going to occupy it. Our forces have other things to clean up here. So I want to take the Army of the Tennessee south. And because I'm given this star and expected to be in Washington, it's only natural I would give command of the Army here to Sherman, who then takes that design and he just takes the painting and embellishes it, if you will, as far as his plan for marching through Georgia.
So this is November 1863. Things are wrapping up here in Tennessee. Sherman will be left here, and you're recalled to Washington, where in February, that decision is made to make Grant the overall commander. You'll oversee all the theaters of the war.
Yes.
But, as we know, the war was won in the West. Things are going to take a turn east.
Right, and I want to come back even if I am commanding. Sherman says, now that it's obvious I'm going to get that command, that I say, well, Sherman, you're going to take it over. And he says, come ride with us anyway. And it's clear to me in the East that somebody needs to ride herd and make sure that the Army of the Potomac stays aggressive. And Lincoln thinks I'm going to stay in the capital. Everybody thinks for me where I'm going to be. And I think for myself that I need to be in the field. I can manage by telegraph and rail if I need to, that we're going to push there. Politically, now Lincoln is looking at that last year before a possible re-election, and he's got to get the war won, he thinks, if he's going to be re-elected. And that big push is on from there forward.
So that's wrapping us up in Tennessee, and now we'll be seeing some direct supervision out in Virginia.